Welcome to Beyond the Call podcast, where we tell the stories of those people behind the jobs we rely on. We go into the good, the bad and the ugly, and we shine a light in what can be a dark place. Just a warning, the content can be graphic and distressing, so please use your discretion. Please like and subscribe on your podcast platform and our social media. And if you have feedback, I read every single one. Let's get on to this episode of Beyond the Call.
G'day everybody, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Call. I've got a really special guest today. This is going to be an emotional one, and it's going to touch really touch people who know this story, and especially from that first responder stream, but it touches everybody. So today we've got Jeff Toga. Now, it is Toga, okay? It's spelt tougher, but it's Toga. So Jeff Toga is the father of a paramedic called Stephen Toga, who was tragically murdered in April 2023 by a man that was undergoing some serious mental health issues. And Jeff's bravely chosen to take up the fight on behalf of his son, and he's really looking to get some changes happening in the space around protection and in sentencing, etc. So, Jeff, welcome to the podcast. It's really great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for the invite. I need as much exposure as I can get at the moment, so this sort of stuff's really good. Happy to have a chat, mate.
Yeah, mate. It's it's a conversation I wish we never had to have. But I'm more than happy to have you on to spread your message. Now, last night I put a shout out to one of my paramedic networks on Facebook, and I said that I was going to have a conversation with you today, and I just want to read out a couple of messages. I won't put names to them just in case they don't want to be named, but as I was telling you just before, I had one mate who was a paramedic and also an Army veteran. He wanted to fly you up, and he wanted this to be done in person because he really wanted to give you a hug because your story touches everyone. And then I've got a one here, and I'm just going to read this verbatim. No parent should have to live through what the Togas have, much like no paramedic should ever have to experience what happened to his beautiful son. Love to Jeff and the family, sending them strength and gratitude for standing by other paramedics while in their darkest hour. It takes an enormous amount of courage to keep fighting and speaking up on the behalf of others when you have lost so much personally. Deepest respect and heartfelt condolences, Jeff. Hashtag I stand with Jeff. Hashtag Stephen's Law. And Stephen's Law is something we're going to talk about a lot. Yeah. So that's just an example of mate, we are all with you.
Yeah. I talk about the ripple effect and dropping a pebble into a pond and the ripples fan out and you never know who's touched by the ripples. Here we are having a chat 2,000 miles apart, and we're all touched by the ripples that was what happened to my son. So, yeah, I appreciate every word that everybody gives us, and I understand how they support us and how much it means to them as well as what it means to us. Yeah, great. Thank you very much for everybody.
Yep. No worries at all. We really do support you. So you have something you wanted to read, and then we'll get into a conversation. So, do you want to give a background of what this is?
Yeah, it's just a speech that I gave to the Rotary Club at Camden. It puts things into perspective in like a book format, so that we'll talk about Chapter 1 being the act, Chapter 2 being the trial, and then Chapter 3 being the fight for change, which is where we're up to at the moment. So it just puts things in line so you can get a bit of an idea of what's happened over the last 2 years. So, but firstly, I'd like to read out a little bit about my boy, just tell you a little bit about Stephen. Stephen was born to be a paramedic. From an early age, he showed immense levels of compassion for one so young. As a small boy, he would go shopping with his mother. When asked to choose a toy from the toy shop, he always chose the doctor's set. No balls, no bats, no guns or cowboy hats for Stevie. It was always a stethoscope. He'd be forever testing your reflexes with his little hammer or shining a torch in your eyes, checking for dilated pupils. As he got older, his hunger for service to others saw him join St John's Ambulance. He wasn't quite old enough, so he fibbed about his age. Stephen was a big kid, so it went unnoticed. I think he was 11 when he joined as a cadet. We discovered not long ago that he put handmade business cards in people's letterboxes saying, if you need first aid, call Steve. That was at the age of about 11. Consequently, we never had any Band-Aids left because he'd handed them out to everybody in his own handmade first aid kits. As a rugby league and boxing coach, I tried to teach him how to fight. He just wasn't interested. In the ring, if there was a bleeding nose or a sprained wrist, Stephen would be there with a damp cloth and some ice to attend to the wounded. As time went on, he felt the calling for the care industry and decided he wanted to become a nurse. I'm sure he knew it was a pathway to being a paramedic. Trouble was, he hated school. In year 11, we would get notes from the school saying Stephen has missed many days this year. When we'd say, how many has he missed? They'd say, well, 56 days. When we found out he'd had 56 days off, we realised it was time we needed to have a talk, Steve. So he promised his mum he'd knuckle down, and he managed to get a pass mark, so he had his HSC. Stephen approached the local private hospital with regards to gaining a traineeship. They knocked him back because they didn't do traineeships. Stephen then went away and researched what benefits the hospital could get if they did have a trainee. And he went back to the hospital and spoke to the manager and told her, and she said, well, we'd better get one then, and you're it. So he was signed up there as a trainee to become a nurse, so he's well on his way. He went on to become an RN and a theatre nurse and would often be called upon to cannulate difficult patients when others couldn't. When he decided to enrol in an online university to become a paramedic, I was sceptical. But if Stephen put his mind to something, nothing would stop him. He became a paramedic and was stationed in Camden in Western Sydney in early 2022. So that's the story of Stevie. He was driven and born to be. Acts of service was in his soul, cut from the same cloth as the people we're talking about, So anyway, with the book format, I'll read this out. This would be chapter 1. This would be called The Act. Ready for this?
Yep.
It was about 6 a.m. on Friday, the 14th of April. I was lying in bed, half asleep, thinking about getting up to go to work, and I was listening to my wife breathing as she slept beside me. Suddenly, her phone rang next to her bed. She woke slowly and answered. The voice on the phone was stern and sombre at the same time. She jumped out of bed and said, "What? Oh, my God, no," and ran from the room into the kitchen. I was trying to figure out who was on the line. Jill burst into tears and sobbed uncontrollably. What the fuck? I thought, who is it? It's the ambulance, she cried, and Stephen's been stabbed. All I could say was, oh, no. Anyway, Stephen's sister Jessica, who had just flown home from the UK for Stephen's wedding the month before, was living with us and was in the back room. I opened the door and she looked at me and said, "Dad, what's wrong?" I couldn't think of any way to tell her that would shield her, so I just said, "Stephen's been stabbed." I tried to remain calm and think what to do next. Jill was still on the phone to the ambulance, and they were telling her that they were picking Stephen's wife, Madison, up, and they were going to take us to Liverpool Hospital, which is about 70 k's from where we live. So Stephen had been attacked in the car park of McDonald's, Campbelltown, and he'd been rushed to Liverpool. We live in Bulli, which is a suburb at the north end of Wollongong. It's about an hour and 20 minutes from Liverpool. Maddie was in Warilla, which is another half an hour away from us. We all got dressed and anxiously waited for the driver to turn up. They kept us informed about when they were going to be here. We all went outside to wait. As we walked down the driveway, there was the most intense rainbow I've ever seen. It was huge and so bright. We all remarked about it. It spread from Wollongong all the way along Bulli Pass, and they picked us up around 7:15. So off we went in a mad dash to Liverpool. The rainbow seemed to follow us as we sped up Bullow Pass, with sirens flaring. I remember thinking that the rainbow was a sign. I was sitting in the front seat desperately saying to myself, just hang in there, son, just hang in there. We're coming, mate. Just hang in there. As we sped through peak hour traffic, it seemed an age before we got to the hospital. No one spoke for the entire trip. We were met at the ambulance bay by the emergency drop-off by 2 police officers, 1 detective and a female constable. Jill was clutching my arm and Jess was huddled closely. The detective started to speak when I noticed the constable had been crying. The words fell from his lips. I regret to inform you that your son is deceased. I recall desperately wanting to see him. We were led down what seemed to be endless corridors to a room. Wait for the doctor to tell us how they tried to save him. They said he'd suffered 3 fatal stab wounds. Then we were led to another room attended by a policewoman. There he was, fully covered by a hospital blanket, still in his paramedic's uniform, his hands fitted with blue surgical gloves, and his big boots sticking out the edge of the bed. Only his face was visible. He looked to be at rest. I noticed a deep cut in his chin. There's been a struggle, was my first thought, which didn't seem to make sense since he'd probably supposedly been stabbed 3 times. I held his hand and kissed his cold forehead. I told him I loved him and left the room. I rounded the corner in the storage room and I cried like I'd never cried before. We were later told that the time of death was 7:15, which is why we hold rainbows so sacred in our family. So that's chapter 1. That was the day. Chapter 2 is called The Trial. Just as a side note to the chapter, I read a book by Ken Marslew called Motivated by Murder. In that book it says the New South Wales legal system treats you like it's none of your business, and even quotes to the judge saying there's no place for emotion in the courtroom. This piece of information stuck with me and proved to be invaluable during the whole ordeal that was the trial. I learned that once you understand this, you won't be surprised by what happened. After 18 long months, we finally had a date for the trial, November the 4th, 2024, in the Supreme Court in Sydney. We were told to expect 6 weeks trial, which with a full jury and all that entails, so we booked accommodation in Surrey Hill. I managed to get leave from work for that period and we set ourselves for who knows what. The trial was set down for Monday, which was the 4th. However, we were called into the DTP's office in Wollongong the previous Tuesday and told that the prosecution were planning for this thing called a special verdict, which meant that the prosecution had met with the defence and agreed that they were to ask the judge for this verdict. This meant no jury, no cross-examination of Sykes, and no verdict of murder. Just that the act was proven and the mental health of the perpetrator was the reason for this decision. Basically, 2 lawyers had found 2 psychiatrists to agree and had come up with a request for the judge to rule on. The DDP were terrified that if this person was charged with murder, he'd appeal and be let out with a lesser charge. And they quoted the case of Angry Anderson, which is Rose Tedder's lead singer, son who was murdered by his best friend on a drug-fueled rage. They didn't want the result for such a high-profile case as ours. So that was the reason behind the whole special verdict thing, which they mentioned directly Angry Anderson's case 4 or 5 times, and they were petrified that it was going to blow up and look bad, if you know what I mean. So when it was put to the judge the first session on a Monday morning, he agreed and said, I'll pass it now if you want it. So it was we were set up for a 6-month period in court, a 6-week trial with cross-examining and everything else. It was the trial had only been going for half an hour, and the judge leans over and says, well, I'll pass it now if you want. So that would be out the window, nothing, Anyway, that's what he said. So the whole thing could have been over within the first 2 hours of the trial. The DDP seemed shocked by this and requested that the details be read out for the defendant and the 16 registered victim impact statements be allowed to be heard. He agreed, and so began the most gruelling part of the trial. Up until now, we'd only limited information given to us about what had actually happened on that morning. As we sat together no more than 8 feet away from the person who murdered my son, we were exposed to the most graphic details about every moment of the event. We heard all about the moments leading up to the event, including how the person had assaulted 5 other victims that night before he came upon my boy. We heard how this person had launched his attack on my son while he wasn't looking. We heard how this person made my son beg for his life, and this person took it away anyway. We heard how the killer had said, "I'm going to prison, so I may as well finish it." We heard how the person had stabbed my son 55 times, and there had indeed been a struggle, which I knew from what I'd seen now. And then we had to hear how the psychologist came up with the excuse that he knew what he was doing, but he didn't know what he was doing was wrong. That was really hard to handle at the time. As the trial went on and we got a better picture of the killer, we started to understand that he and his family had been trying to get help for him. So the deeper you got into it, the more you understood the background of what had happened. But like I say, they treat you like it's none of your business. So anyway, I started to see that this kid was a very sick individual and that he too was a victim of a broken mental health system that lets those people roam the streets untreated and unsupervised. What the whole trial proved was that my boy had to die for this kid to get the mental health treatment that he's now getting. Hearing the victim impact statement of so many people involved in that night and months following has given me cause to pursue a better outcome, which is what I'm trying to do now. We were treated like it was none of our business, and I was left feeling hollow and empty. This had been a tragic waste of not just my son's life, but 2 families and so many other people who were forever changed by that event, which leads me to do what I'm trying to do now. Talk about the ripple effect of dropping pebbles into a pond. You never know who the ripples touch, and even the judge mentioned this in the trial address. So many people have been touched by this, and the ripples continue. And as you sit here tonight, or you sit here today, you too have even been touched. So that's the end of chapter 2, which explains how we were treated in the trial. I'll go into much more detail later on. And then chapter 3, which I'd call the fight for change, which is where we're up to now. So happy to tell you what we've been up to. Yeah. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
Thanks for letting me read that.
No, thank you for painting that picture. I think a lot of us, well, yeah, we can't put ourselves in your position. It's impossible. Your son's attack came 4 months after mine, and it rocked the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he was
the what ifs.
Yeah. He's Steve was married in March. He was murdered in April, and his baby was born in May. So you can't write it any sadder than that. It's just it's just a shit show completely. And I
wanted to ask you about his work partner that day.
Yeah.
How is your relationship with her, and how is she?
She's a beautiful kid, mate. If you can understand the stress she was put under. Without being too graphic, she doesn't recall a lot of the event, which is fantastic for her. I mean, when it does come back, it's going to be a bombshell for her. But she's a lovely kid. Where I keep in contact with her. I kept her informed to a lot of what was going on at the trial, because she was just treated as a witness. That's all. That's the way they treat you. She's a great kid, but she's struggling with it as well. PTSD, I assume, and it's a dreadful thing that happened, and I'm so indebted to her and the way she conducted herself and the things. I did hear that she tried to intervene and that sort of thing. She's a little beautiful young lady, and you could just imagine her getting involved. And yeah, it was just a terrific event, mate.
Yeah.
I hope
Do you know if
she
is
comes
she
out
still
of it.
in the job?
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's one that I don't think she's actively out in the community yet, but she's trying to work her way back to it. So there was a girl that was in charge of what happened that night. She was an Indigenous girl who was so proud of what she'd done, breaking the ceiling of where the hierarchy and all that, and how far she'd come with it all. She was so badly affected by this that she can't write an email. And she read her victim impact statement out to the courts, and the amount of people this event touched is amazing, and to that poor kid too, like that's a whole career. You guys don't do this because it's for the money, you guys do this because it's in your soul, My boy was cut from the same cloth as you people. Yeah, like I say, it touched so many people and at such high levels. I mean, even the out of those 16 victim impact statements, one of them was the commissioner himself, Dr. Don Morgan. He's become a close friend of ours now. He's a compassionate man. He's got the unenviable job of trying to manage the whole service and with money restraints and everything else, So, but when he read out that people like yourself are being confronted in the streets, and what people are saying to them is, "We'll stab you like that other bastard," and that when you hear that in court, it's very, very hard to come to terms with, especially when the bloke that did it is 8 feet away from you, and you look across, and to hear how that bloke made my boy beg for his life and told my boy to apologise, say you're sorry for what you've done, and this is the graphic stuff we hadn't. I know we had none of this given to us before the trial. We were just treated like other viewers in the gallery,
Why
like I
do
say,
they not give you that information before the trial? Is it a deliberate strategy? Is it
I've
just
no idea, mate. I have no idea. I think it's just the way it's always been. I think it's just so it's like you said, there's no place for emotion in the courtroom. But we should have been given a briefing, first of all, as to why they were going down that track. They did try and explain to us. I wanted to cross-examine these two psychs. I wanted to speak to those two and find out how they come up with the idea that he knew what he was doing, but he didn't know it was wrong. But to me, if you say I'm going to prison, so I'm going to finish it, that what they call the pub test, that doesn't pass the pub test.
That certainly jumped out at me.
Yeah.
If you can understand the consequences to your actions, I thought that was the definition of knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, and plus, and it was diminished responsibility due to mental illness and that sort of thing. And police, when we started to get right into the nitty gritty and hear a little bit about what had happened up to the 14th with that fella, I mean, he'd been charged with and convicted of assaulting his next door neighbour, and he'd been put on a 12-month course of injections like medication. Yep. That happened in 2022, and in 2021, and by November 2022, the 12-month course had been done, and he decided he didn't want to take it anymore, didn't want to do it anymore. So if you can imagine being at the peak of your mental health after the injections, then to make the decision that you don't want to do it anymore, Well, to me, that tells me then he's responsible for that decision, which you would assume that if the medicine works, then he'd be at the best position to make that decision, right? And I understand that makes you fat and makes you lazy and all that sort of stuff. But he was left to his own devices after that. So it took from November 2022 to April 2023 for that kid to become what he became and do what he did. We heard that his parents had been screaming out for help, and even the kid tried to hang himself the night before. The reason he was in trouble in Bunnings is because he'd gone there to buy rope, and he couldn't find a tree strong enough to do what he did, and then he embarked on. He was on a rampage from the 13th till 5:30 in the morning, which is when he met my son. So it's hard to feel any sort of anger towards him because, like I say, he's a victim of a mental health system that's just doesn't work.
Yeah.
He was left untreated and unlooked after. He'd locked himself in his room, frightened to come out because of what the voices were saying to him. His mother and his family tried to get help, but he was just ignored, And once you hear that, he's just another ticking time bomb, mate. The public's full of them. They're everywhere.
I'm imagining the Bondi issue when that happened, the stabbings would have been very difficult for you
We were away camping.
Such similar circumstances.
Yeah, we try and get away the anniversary. So we try and go somewhere. I still do radio interviews and things like that, but because it comes around every year. But we were away camping back of a river down here, and it came out over the news that it had happened in exactly 12 months. So it's just that's what I'm saying. It's out there, mate. There's the time bombs are out there, and the pendulum seems to have swung too far in the wrong direction. They're left to their own devices with the mental health side of it. That's a very big bucket to kick over, and I'm just one bloke trying to do my best. I'm trying to be a little bit more than a grieving parent and try to change things make society a better place. But that's the case. Yeah, that really was. That did dig into us, and then when you start to hear the victims but yeah.
When the news broke that he was not going to be criminally charged on mental health grounds, it just happened that day I was going to go see my psychiatrist for some of my treatment, and I'm obviously a member of quite a few paramedic Facebook groups, and to say anger would be just underselling it. There was fury.
It's more disgust, isn't it?
Disgust. And frustration, etc. Now, I brought it up with my psychiatrist because it upset me as well. And she had worked in forensic psychiatry before, so she dealt with people like this person, and in those circumstances where they were locked up in a mental health facility. And she said, "Look, to be honest, he'll serve longer in there than he would if he was found guilty of a crime, of murder." She said she remembers being talking to people that had been in there for 35 years that were medicated. And a lot of these people, when they are medicated, are normal functioning people. And they have, and she remembers them saying, "If I had been found guilty of murder, I'd be free by now." So she said, it's actually, they actually get, a lot of them get a longer sentence by being in a forensic facility. But it just takes away that feeling of process and that feeling of justice.
Yeah. It's a sad situation, mate, but you can't let it grind you away to become something else, Like I said to you the other day, there was a period there where I'd love to be in a 10-foot room with a samurai sword and see who comes out, you know. But that lasted about 10 minutes. Because I realised it was not going to help. It was not going to help me. You know, it's not going to help my cause. It was not going to help. Wasn't going to help anything, you know, feeling like that. I've seen people and spoken to people who've gone through similar stuff and seen what that type of anger and rage can do to you. So I choose, like I said the other day also, we all have a choice. That's what we're born with, is a choice. And I choose not to let what happened damage me any further. I choose to not be hurt by it anymore. I can't be hurt anymore by it. Stephen definitely can't be hurt anymore by it. My family, we can't be hurt anymore by it. And I now put my purpose and my drive into changing what we're trying to do for people like yourself, and not just in New South Wales or Queensland. This is a worldwide issue. This is happening everywhere. Disrespect has become such a badge of honour in the community these days that it can't be let to ferment into what it becomes in violent acts, and becomes, you know, the community's unsafe. You know, you guys, there's no way you guys should be looking over your shoulder while you're doing CPR on a blue baby. And that's the way it is at the moment. You know, that we're here, and we did a tour, like a bit of a rock and roll tour without the drugs, if you know what I mean. We did a 5-day tour from Wollongong, where we live, through Canberra down to Albury, and then back up through New South Wales, central New South Wales, to the not to the Gold Coast, to the Coffs Harbour, over 5 days. And we went to as many ambulance stations as we could. We were doing media things like TV, and we were doing radio as well. So, like I say, it was a rock and roll tour. And it was like that too, you know. We'd go knock on the door of an ambulance station, and they'd open and say, "Oh, Mr. Tager, we're so happy to see you. Come in, come in." They made us feel really, really welcome. And I ran around putting all my stickers, my Stephen's Law stickers, on as many ambulances as I could. And after that, we stood around, we had the conversations, and that's where the real dark side of what's going on started to come out. You know, we heard some horrific stories, and I've probably spoken to 1,000 paramedics in the last 2 years. Every one of them's got an assault story. It's either verbal, it's either physical, or sexual, which is even more disgusting. And every one of you have got. And if my wife said to me, if we'd known this, we would have suggested Stephen stay as a nurse, you know, but you couldn't stop Steve. You know what it's like, you guys, bound to do it. You're not in it for whatever, for any other reason except it's in you. And you blokes need to be protected, and the girls. And it's not that hard to do what we're suggesting they do, you know. It's not that difficult.
So one of the most recent things that have come to the news that garnered a bit of attention was that a roundtable that the New South Wales Ambulance had regarding occupational violence, and I believe that you were part of that.
Yeah.
And the one that made the headlines was the use of holograms.
Well, you know, at the time when they said that, I thought, that'll never happen. How can that happen? How can that even be, you know? How can that even be considered? And then the media caught on to that, and they rang me up to say what I thought. And I just thought, look, you have to look at it from both sides. The management are trying, that's what the round table was about. Management are trying to come up with as many ideas as they can to protect people. And that was just right at the very end. That was something that they said they were looked into. Yeah, it was just an ad hoc thing, but the media jumped on it. You know, realistically, what you need to do is stop single responses. You can't be going to places by yourself. We did learn that the radios are insufficient, they don't work inside and that sort of stuff. And most of the places you go are inside for a start. So if somebody arcs up and you're confronted by danger, you've got no communication if you're by yourself. And like dual or double or twin or whatever you want to call it, twin responses, it's the only way to protect yourselves. We heard some really harrowing things at that meeting. One young lady, petite, beautiful young girl, 25, whatever, that might be a bit old, I don't know. But she was confronted by an ice addict, and that was another thing that was brought up. The drugs have changed. Once upon a time, heroin addicts fell asleep on the footpath, and that was all they got up to. This new gear winds them up, gives them the strength of 20 men, and that sort of thing. This paramedic spoke about how she was and her 6-foot-tall ex-bouncer paramedic companion were confronted by this lunatic. If it wasn't for her shooting him with a fire extinguisher, she has no doubt she would have been killed because this bloke was threatening to do it. And it gave her, she squirted the fire extinguisher out this bloke, which gave her enough time to get into the ambulance and lock it, and her and a companion got in together. Then this bloke was on the front of the ambulance trying to smash through the windscreen and trying to attack her that way. Think of that. Just think of that in terms of the fear factor, And she,
I don't have to. It happened to me.
well, that's what I'm saying.
That exact thing happened to me.
There you go.
And I dead set thought I was going to die, and it's ruined my career, and it's altered my life.
She said that what crossed her mind was to run him over, just run over him and get out of there, escape, and fear. But her mate said, you can't do that. Well, it'll be done for manslaughter and all that garbage that goes with it. I mean, life is life, mate. Ask yourself what you do. Well, you don't have to ask yourself, but other people do, especially members of parliament and magistrates. They don't think in anything like that, they don't understand. And having heard all these stories and about what goes on, and that was just one, there's, like I said, you've all got a story, but that one struck my wife and I as being particularly poignant to what we're trying to do. She was more concerned for the law and what would happen to her than saving her own skin. Right?
Do you think that's part of the problem, is that we've all got a story and therefore it's accepted? Well, it's a cost of business.
I believe that until it happens to a magistrate or a politician or a member of their family, it'll be considered a side issue. It's too hard. It's like the mental health bucket, mate. In this state, the Minister for Mental Health has got five portfolios. He's got mental health, she's got youth, she's got housing, she's got water, and she's got Central Coast. That's 5 plates you got to spin at once, keep in the air. How do you concentrate on what's going on in one portfolio, let alone 5? I couldn't believe
That's something
one.
I've never understood, is how you can have such varying, if they were kind of linked, you could almost understand it. But that I mean, to have water and mental health is just nuts.
Yeah, and housing. I mean, I work in the housing
They're
contract.
big on their own.
Yeah, exactly. I consider myself a frontline worker. I work for a company that does the servicing of housing complexes in the Illawarra here. I've got 254 properties that are chock full of housing tenants. The amount of mental health that's in those complexes. I'm lucky that I'm the manager. I don't have to deal with the tenants face to face, but my blokes that I'm in charge of do. The mental health is rife in those places, because they're people that are down on their luck for whatever reason. they're in public housing, and a lot of them expect to be treated like they're royalty, And if someone doesn't mow their lawn for them properly, they arc up, and that's just the way society's become.
Yeah.
And that's why we need legislation so that there is some consequence for your actions. That's basically, I believe, what I'm trying to bring in through Stephen's Law is a holistic approach. I'm trying to bring in body-worn cameras. I'm trying to bring in stab vests. Trying to bring in mandatory 12-month minimum jail term, which can be served as a suspended sentence, provided you deal with your anger issues, your anger management, your drug addiction, your mental health, all that sort of stuff. And then I'm trying to also have a comprehensive advertising campaign so that the public knows that Stephen's Law means mandatory 12-month minimum jail term and all that sort of stuff, to like a holistic approach to change the way people think. I was thinking about this interview just this morning, and I was trying to come up with a way, if we could gauge what the crooks think, if you could go to a prison and ask those people what they think about assaulting an AMBO, for example. Is it okay by them, or is it just the fringe junkies that are doing this stuff? It would be good to know if you had that information, you could probably work out what would work, I mean, a lot of them. See, ideally, the scenario I'm trying to change there is, if I'm a junkie and you're a paramedic, right, and I punch you in the head for whatever reason, like they do, currently the minimum penalty you face is a $550 fine. Well, I'm a junkie. I'm not going to pay that, right? So I leave the court, giving the court the finger, back with me mates bragging about how I got away with it. But 3 months down the track, the sad part is, when I'm ODing on the footpath, you're contract bound to come and deal with me again. So the 12-month sentence is to put a 12-month gap between when you and I come into contact again, because currently you, as a paramedic, could meet me the next day on the street, again, as you doing your job, The idea of the cameras is to capture the evidence so that you don't have to be laying there at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, will I press charges against this bullfed or not? What will happen if I do? Do I get involved or don't I? At the end of your shift, you'll hand your camera in and you'll say there's an incident on there. Police will look at it and say, well, we'll charge him under Stephen's Law, or if he's a registered mental health person, we'll charge him under the Mental Health Act, and he'll get what he deserves, right? So that's the idea of the cameras. But what I did find out at that round table was the trust between yourself, the rank and file paramedics, and management is at an all-time low. There's no trust between the two of you, and the paramedics are frightened to report any incidents, especially if it's on camera, because they'll be held accountable by their actions. Did they follow process? This. In fact, it's realistically about covering the ambulance's ass, and at the behest of the paramedic, and of what he went through, of the victim. So that's something that has to be addressed. There is no trust between the floor and management, and that was highly apparent at that meeting. They were called together to sit around and have a bit of a powwow and write out bits of paper on what you suggest. But the paramedics mutinied. They stood up and said, we're not here to do table exercises. We're here to get something from this meeting, And from what I'm told, the last round table meeting they had was in 2018, and nothing came of it. So people ask me, since what's happened to us, what's occurred? And it embarrasses me to say, well, nothing has occurred. Nothing's changed. So the idea of it all, the holistic approach, has to be looked at that way. It can't be asked, stab vests will solve it. And what I want there, I don't want the people like yourself to wear the stab vest all day, every day, but I want it available at close hand if you want to put it on if you feel unsafe. If you go into a mental health patient, for example, put it on. If you go into an old lady that's broken a leg in the park, well, don't. That's just my opinion. Look, you would know that there's probably some unforeseen risks even in that.
For me, it's ultimately what's the harm of providing it?
Yeah. Now, well,
if you wear it, you wear it. If you don't wear it, you don't wear it. But what's the harm in actually providing it? It costs some money.
Yeah. Well, I got some samples from a company in Brisbane of some stab vests, right? Now, the big part about the stab vests is the opinion of older members of management making decisions for younger members of management. I see that as being a major problem. Now, the blokes that I dealt with are in their 60s, they're on the back door, they're looking for retirement, doesn't matter to them because they're not on the floor, most of them anyway. They were telling me, you can't wear these vests, you can't because they're too heavy, you can't do CPR in them, you can't do this, you can't, right? So I got these two samples sent to me. One of them was a what they call a covert vest. And this was at Parliament House in Sydney. And I put it on underneath my shirt and I wore it to the meeting. And the other one was the responder vest, which is the one the coppers wear, which is a big bulky thing, right? Put that on the table and I sat back and I just, as we were talking, it came around to stab vests and all these old fellas are telling me, I can't wear this, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they're thinking about 25 years ago, technology, steel plated on this, and this. And I let them go for about an hour and then I stood up and I said, listen, you blokes, I've been listening to you guys talk for the last hour, and I took my shirt off. And I said, I've been wearing this vest now for an hour and not one of you even knew I had it on. It weighs 1.2 kilos. It takes 80 kilos of force to push a blade through this woven Kevlar, and you can do CPR in it for half an hour because my daughter and I have tested it out. And it just went silent.
One of the most common people to do CPR at a job is the police officers. And I've never seen one of them say, I can't, I'm wearing a stab vest.
Exactly. This is the excuses that were coming up. And let me tell you also, it's not about money. It's not about money. It's about apathy, right? Because I spoke to the health minister down here and Ryan Park is a great fellow. He's my local member. I've had great service and great response from him. I mentioned to him that I could probably get these vests for about $850, and I thought, well, you got 5,500 actual paramedics in the New South Wales service. I said, if you round it out to about 1,000, that's what, 5.5 million. And he looked at me and I thought, I didn't know what to say. I thought, is that a big number or not, And he said, that's the median price of a house in Sydney. And I went, well, yeah, that's right. Look at it that way. So money's not the problem. It's more about apathy and changing perceptions, really. But it's strange that the only person who paid any attention, I put the spec sheet and everything on the table as well. The only person who picked it up and read it was the Attorney General. And I thought, well, that's got to be good. And he mentioned, he said, 80 kilos of pressure to push a knife through this. Because that was only months after what had happened. And we went to his office as well, because what I'm trying to change is he has to do it. And he was bragging about how he doubled the knife laws in this state. And I thought, yeah, well, good on you, mate, beauty, yeah, but what else are you going to do, And when we put to him what we're trying to do, we got back from him that you can't use mandatory minimum sentencing, which is just not true because they do already. Because in this state, there's a law called a coward punch. If you kill someone by a coward punch, it's an 8-year minimum sentence. If you badly assault a police officer, it's a 5-year minimum sentence. If you kill a police officer, it's a mandatory life, 25-year sentence. So they do it. So, for him to say that was quite disparaging, to say the least. And then he also, when he said to me, this is when we met him in his office later on, he said, we can't have it for everyone. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the prisons will be full of prisoners. What do we build prisons for? So and then he astounded me when he said, and we can't have it for parking inspectors, for example. My first thought was, well, they're the people most likely to get a punch in the head. Why don't you protect those people? I believe that it's an OH&S issue. If you're in your workplace, if you deliver pizzas for a living and you get punched out at the front door, you're in your workplace, aren't you? That person should be brought under Stephen's law as attacking you in your workplace, and be given a 12-month mandatory minimum sentence. I don't believe.
So he actually said that you wouldn't be able to have this law applied to parking inspectors.
That was his words, and I wouldn't say otherwise, because you don't want to deal with the Attorney General telling fibs, do you? That's what he said to us, and I was astounded by that. I thought, I just thought to myself, wow, that gives you an idea about where that man's head is, to even suggest that, that it could be.
Is there a mandatory minimum sentence for beating up a politician? Yeah, hold on. I'm just going to pause it. I'm just having some camera issues. All right, and we're back. Sorry about that, guys. I had a bit of a camera issue. So I was just saying, I wonder if they have minimum mandatory sentences for politicians, assaulting politicians.
Well, I know some people that are line up to do it. It's just the way it is at the moment. Like, the main issue is those in power, those in places that can make these changes and make these differences, are just not aware of what's going on. They just don't know what's happening in the real world. When someone calls an ambulance, that's the potential for this to happen again. They don't understand the danger you guys face. And when at that meeting, that became really, really obvious. And I think the management don't seem to realise your fears either. Because they send you out on single responses and that sort of thing. I did have a meeting just last Friday with the head of the Health Services Union. They called us into their office to have a bit of a chat, and they can't, from what they were saying, they've got the recruitment levels at a point now. Once upon a time, they had not enough numbers so that they could justify single responses. But now, in the last 5 years, I think they've recruited another 2,500 people. And under Ryan Park, the new health minister, they've recruited another 500. So they can't be placing manning issues as being the reason for single responders. So the union's going to be pushing for that. And so there'll be no more, there'll only be two-person responses from now on. And that's, from what they're telling me, that's going to come into law very soon, which will be like industrial relations law. And they've told me they'll call that Stephen's law. So that's a beautiful gesture, but it's only part the way what I'm trying to achieve for you guys, So to have Stephen's law called to prevent single responses is fantastic thing to have happen.
I've worked single officer for the best part of 17 years, and it is fraught with dangers psychologically and physically.
Yeah.
Psychologically, I think is vastly understated. The inability to debrief after a job, if a job goes badly, as in a bad outcome, doesn't mean clinically it went. You can have a good clinical job and still have a bad outcome, but you question yourself, and if you don't have a partner to bounce things off, it can be damaging.
Yeah.
So look, I've asked the commissioner at a forum once if there is any chance of getting rid of single officers, and it comes down to dollars.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was encouraging to hear that from the union. I don't know about in Queensland, but that's what's happened here in New South Wales. Just a question for you,
said
mate.
You had a pretty decent relationship with the commissioner.
Oh, yeah.
Is it so? But at the same time, they're the decision makers. Within reason. They've obviously got to manage upwards to the politicians. They are the gate. The gateway to the politicians and the people that need to go and to bat for us. Is the genuine want to make a change from that level?
I believe so. About a week after what happened to Stephen, my local member, who, like I said, his name's Ryan Park, he's a Minister for Health down here. Him and the Premier, Chris Minns, came to my house. Right, they came to visit me here. And we sat down out the back table, and I don't treat them like they're anything other than people. I talk to them the same way I'm speaking to you. I don't say, oh, yes, Premier, yes, Minister, blah, blah, blah. When they came to my house, I said, right, boys, come in here, sit down at the back table. Righto, mate. And I had a poem that I had received from a paramedic. And it was a bit like yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? Yesterday, I was so proud to put on my stethoscope and leave the house and put my lapels on and leave the house and be part of the community and so respected in the community. Today, I'm not so sure. I can't drive around without the ambulance being locked. I'm looking over my shoulder all the time. And tomorrow, I don't know if I can continue without the support of, without this changing and things changing. And I sat them down there and I said, read this, boy. Right. They both read it, and both of them teared up. Both of them were visibly shaken by what they read. So I would put that in to them being emotionally involved. I said to them, you guys can, because of the brutality and the randomness of the attack that happened to my son, I said, you guys, the public interest has been enormous, and that's what, without being too crass, that's given me the drive and the impetus to do what I'm trying to do, and the public perception and the public sentiment behind it all is what's pushing me, right? So for the politicians to show interest and to be in that situation, I said to them, you blokes can ride this wave of public sentiment or you can be washed away by it. That's up to you. So I've had access to the Attorney General, the Mental Health Minister. I've had access to the Premier. The Premier rings me every 12 months. I spoke to him just recently in April this year. Ryan Park gives me access to everything that's going on. He keeps me informed. This government came along. They've only been in power for the last 2 years, and some could say that's long enough to make a change, but the wheels of politics turn fairly slowly. I've understood in the last 2 years, but they've given me every indication that they are concerned about what's going on, and they're going to try and do their best to change things. So, what can you do? I've sent an email to every sitting member because on the first day of the Minns government, we were invited to be in the gallery, and the very first item on the agenda was Stephen. And every one of those sitting members at the time, be they Liberal, Independent, Labor, whatever, every one of those people were in the room, and they Chris Minns, the Premier, pointed to us and said, I'd like to welcome the Toga family, and every one of those sitting members saw us. So they know who we are, right? They now know what I'm trying to do. I released my sticker campaign, my bumper sticker campaign. I've now got 11,000 stickers circulating in the community, and the idea behind the stickers is to gain awareness in as many electorates as possible. So when these people, these actual members who met us on the day, come back and sit down to Parliament and they see Stephen's Law, they'll understand what we're trying to achieve, the recommendations we're trying to bring in. So I sent an email to every one of them telling them what we're trying to do, and that's the idea behind. That's the campaign that we're trying to do. And I've sent stickers. You may even see some getting around in Townsville, mate, because I've sent some up that way. I've sent them to Western Australia. I've sent them many to Victoria. Tasmania's got them. Everybody's got them. I've sent some to Atlanta, Georgia in America. I've sent some to the UK. I've had inquiries from Canada about what we're trying to do, because this is a worldwide issue. This is something that this government has the opportunity to be the first to legislate anything like this to protect you guys. This doesn't have to be a state-by-state thing. This could be a nationwide objective, and it can bring safety, and it can let the public know that they've had enough, right? You know, the Queensland government, the Labor government up there, has recently been voted out on a youth crime platform, right? Now, these guys down here, the Minns government, are well aware of that. They're all about numbers, right? Now, my Facebook page has 10.1 thousand followers as of this morning. There's 11,000 stickers circulating through the community. I've done I've done several media campaigns on television. You might have seen me on A Current Affair. I've done radio stuff, all that. The word's getting out, and the ripples they're heading out there. Like I say, here we are sitting today having this conversation. So those in power who understand numbers can't ignore us. They can't ignore yourselves, and they can't ignore what you people bring to society. They can't be allowed to just brush it like it's a side issue. So
what is the resistance? Why? I mean, everyone agrees with it. And I imagine there's some justice people that are concerned about it. But why hasn't this gone into Parliament already? What's the hold up?
I just think it's too big. It's too big an issue for them to act on and make one decision. And we don't want Band-Aids either. You know, if you change the law, right, to become what we want, so that those who perpetrate these things are held responsible for what they do, then that's the basis that everything else can work from. So if the law says you act like this is what happens to you, public perception of the law will change, and that'll bring about change in the public. The public will think twice before they do these things. Your people will then be happy to report these things because something will come of it. Because at the moment, the reason they're not is firstly the trust issue between the management, ambulance management, and then there's the issue that nothing happens to these people. Like the issue of, I get emails all the time of stories of career-ending assaults where the person who did what he did got nothing happened to him. He now lives 300 metres up the road from me, and every time he walks past, he gives me the finger.
Yeah.
What does that do for people? Nothing happened to this person. So once that perception changes about you're held responsible for what you do, that's the basis of it all. The law has to change first, as far as I'm concerned. If the law changes first, that gives the impression that the government's doing something about it, right? Makes you think twice about what you're trying to do, okay? So
one of the biggest issues when it comes to the justice system and community is community expectations. Now, I know that there's that there has to be a separation of powers, and there's church and state, all that sort of stuff. But by judges are so worried about getting decisions overturned on appeal. So they cannot make an example of someone. They cannot go over what the minimums are most of the time unless there's certain circumstances. So by
Let's
by
make
putting
the
those
minimum.
standards in, you're
That's right.
taking that softly approach away from them, which
100%.
needs to happen.
100%. I spoke to a certain shock jock radio person down here very early on, and he said to me, the problem is you need to take away the wriggle room from the magistrates. If you take away the wriggle room, then these things have to occur. So a mandatory minimum 12-month sentence, right? What does that entail? That means that for 12 months, you and I don't come into contact with each other. That lets you go back to work the next day, and it lets you carry on with your career, right? Unhindered. Let me ask you a question. What are you doing at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, most of the time, if I wasn't working, I was in bed.
Yes, and you're thinking about what happens, and you're thinking about what should I do, and thinking about if I should report this, and you're thinking about what will happen to this person. Well, what
Yep.
I'm trying to bring in will take that onus away from you to make that decision.
After I was attacked, and this is a really perfect example. After I was attacked, the person that attacked me did not get charged. I did not have the mental capacity to insist on him being charged. When you're injured from something like this psychologically as well as physically, your decision-making capacity goes down.
100%.
You know, and not only did Stephen lose his life in this, in your situation, not only did Stephen lose his life, how many people's lives have been affected from that, both in a professional work capacity and in a personal capacity?
That's the ripple
can't be
effect,
measured.
mate. That's the ripple effect.
Cannot
That's
be
what
measured.
I'm talking about. And for
Yeah.
people to be contacting me from Canada and contacting me from the UK and asking for stickers in America, this is not just going on down the street, mate. This is worldwide, you know. And at the end of your shift, if there's been an incident, you tell whoever you tell, the boss, you say, there's an incident on that camera. That takes the onus away from you at 3 o'clock in the morning to say, will I or won't I? And then that person is charged, and that person is given a 12-month mandatory sentence, and that person is responsible for their action. How long would it take for all the rats in the community to understand that they can't act like that anymore? This is my point, and this is why.
But the sad part is what people said is so true, is that body-worn cameras, in vehicle cameras, all that sort of stuff, the issue with them is them being weaponized against
100%.
the on-road staff.
And that has to
that's
be
what people are
legislated
terrified
against as well. That has to be legislated. That has to be, that's something that the powers that be, to return that trust, that has to change. They have to be given, the support has to go to you guys. The support doesn't have to be, oh no, are we liable for something somebody's done? Oh no, how can we'll be held responsible for this? Did we train this person properly? Did we supply all that stuff to him? Was he given enough equipment? Blah, blah, blah. That's what they're frightened of. They're frightened of that. And until that changes, until those guys in those positions, those old men who make those decisions, until those people realise that there's more in it at stake than their careers, then that trust won't change. You people won't have the trust to go and do what you do and be confident in doing what you do, that you're safe, and confident that the people who are in charge of you have your concerns at the front of their thoughts. Because at the moment, when there's no trust, there's no unity. You're not acting as a single body. You're acting about us against them. I'm not going to do this because this will happen. Or I'm not covered by this because this happened. I don't want to report this because I can't remember if I did that under stress. I don't remember. Oh, better that I just let it go. It doesn't go anywhere, mate. Physical heals, but mental lasts forever, provided you let it, if you know what I mean. And I'm not being trivial about let it happen to you. You have to understand that you can't let it get to you. You can't let it damage you mentally, because it's the consequences of that are worse. Where that'll
One
drive
of the
you mentally
frequent
is
things
worse.
you hear on forums and stuff like that when we're talking about occupational violence against paramedics is that we should have capsicum spray and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you firsthand that just cannot happen. Any weapon that we could use in defense can be used in attack. But
100%.
B, if you've ever been sprayed, imagine doing that in the back of an ambulance. Everyone is in trouble. So those sort of things, we don't want weapons. Yeah, exactly. You'll end up going into a telegraph pole.
Yeah, how are you going to drive if you can't see? Yeah.
So it's not.
But
about,
I understand that.
It's about minimising risk.
Yes, I understand where they're coming from that. It's
100%.
the same talk about tasers. You should have tasers. I believe you should have those elephant guns where they tranquilise you in the bush and the elephant falls over. That's what I believe. But then, who am I to make those sort of comments? But that your whole thing is to minimise the damage.
I'm still here. We keep going. Oh, there we go. I'm just having some camera issues.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think. And I think we all know, and I think you would agree that having Stephen's law wouldn't necessarily have prevented Stephen's death.
No, it's different circumstances altogether. Different.
Yeah.
But what are we going to do about it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What are we going to do?
Doing nothing. Nothing changes. Nothing changes.
Well, you know what the alternative is? Don't show up. Don't go. Yeah. Don't do it. Don't have ambulance. That's the alternative. Yeah. And
what people need to understand is that we live in our communities that we serve in, most of us. There's not too many that commute away from, where you don't live in those communities. So the chances of you coming across somebody who has assaulted you is very, very high.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And the mental anguish that sparks off in you. Oh, look, there he is over there. Oh, no, I've got to hide, get away from him. He's a lunatic, blah, blah, blah. Well, the grub doing it walks past you and gives you the finger and says, I'll kick your ass next time I see you too. Or we stab you bastards like the last bloke that was stabbed. It can't continue, mate. It can't continue.
Yeah.
Not in the world I see. Not in my world. It can't remain. Community's got to be held responsible for the way they are. And if that means prison for 12 months, if it means whatever it means, then we've got to do something about it. And it's time to understand that the pendulum and the wokeism that's in the community has gone too far. People say to me, what if he's a mental health patient? What if? Well, if you can prove he's a mental health patient, then treat him as one. Then Stephen's law doesn't apply. But if he's just a buffhead acting up, and what that round table thing did show me was the data says that only 25% of attacks on people like yourself are from mental patients. The rest of it's ratbags acting like dickheads. And that's the actual data, and until the disrespect in the community for you people is changed, the old carrot and the stick. No carrot, but try the stick because the carrot's already failed. Try the stick. Give them jail sentences. And another person said to me, well, what about if I'm in Lismore, which is north coast of New South Wales, and the only place in the public sector to do these courses is in Albury, down in Victoria, on the border down there. And I had to think really quickly because it was actually the health minister who asked me this. I said, well, what about prison? What do you mean? I said, we got plenty of prisons, haven't you? He said, yeah. I said, can you imagine doing these courses, sitting in the circle with these guys in the green overalls? He said, if I was a 19-year-old kid and I'd been an idiot and I was sent to prison to sit through my anger management classes, seeing the people that were there, knowing that I could leave when the class was finished, that'd frighten the bejesus out of me. I would be completely changed. And what I'm asking for there, I'm not asking for people to go to prison. I'm asking to change trajectories in life, right? Now, this may seem softly about other than what we've been speaking about, but some of these people who act like this may never have had access to this sort of counselling. And this may be the first time that they've actually had to sit down and actually adjust and be aware of their actions and how they interact with other people. So me, the junkie, I could come back to you in 12 months' time and say, I'm incredibly sorry about the way I acted. I was foolish. I'm now the leader of youth groups and that in my community. I understand how that changed you. Or the other end of the spectrum is back to prison. Deal with it that way.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for to change the perspective of community, because most people, I would say 95% of people in the community wouldn't act that way. And 95%, if not more, are not aware of what you people face every day. Most people we talk to
And I
about
would love for drug use and alcohol use to no longer be an excuse. Unless you can prove that somebody's holding a gun to your head to inject a drug, you took the drug, you're responsible for your actions.
100%.
I mean, if you drink or drug drive, you're held legally responsible for your actions.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
That's the question that needs to be asked. What's the difference? And to take away the wriggle room from the judges. That's the issue here. They're softly about it. I've got a family friend who's mentally challenged, has problems. He's assaulted people. He's what's the word when they rob you with intent? He's done that and he's been convicted of that. He's been held assaulting people, robbing them for money, and he's barred from every bottle shop in the town where he lives. He goes back to court. They keep saying to him, behave yourself or you'll end up in prison. He laughs. He leaves. He's back out in the street begging and bashing people within days, His family have tried so hard to get him into rehab and that sort of thing. There's no beds. He can't do this. He can't do that. He's claiming it's mental health. Where's the responsibility? If he's got alcoholic problems, why isn't he dealing with those problems? Where's the responsibility come from? If the government, if the state's not going to be responsible for him, who's responsible for him? That's why I firmly believe that we should go back to the way things were in the 80s when we had mental health teams. Once upon a time, if someone in your family was kicking off, you could ring a mental health team and they would come to your house. They would assess the person. If they were, say, a registered schizophrenic, for example. I'm suggesting a register of those people that have that affliction, right? Now, I'm not saying it should be public knowledge. I'm not saying everybody shouldn't be walking around with a big S stamped on your forehead. Not saying anything like that. I'm saying you should be on a register where if your family rings up and says, my son's kicking off in the backyard, he's about to hurt someone should come and deal with him respectively, right? So that's what I'm asking for. That's when I sat with the mental health minister. She had no idea about what goes on. She had no idea that the mental health teams don't exist anymore. There's a mental health hotline. If you actually get through to speak to a human being, they will say to you, is he hurting himself? No. Is he going to hurt someone else? Well, not at this stage. Okay, click.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, The
So the one thing I'll
families,
say in that regards that the Queensland Ambulance Service do, and I'm not sure if New South Wales do it, is we do mental health co-responder programs where a mental health nurse and a paramedic go to people in mental health crisis, and it's a great start and it's a great step. It needs about 1,000 more teams to even touch the surface. Mental
yeah,
health is such a huge proportion of what paramedics and police do. Huge.
it's a big bucket. And for someone like myself to kick it over, it's an awesome thought, you know. But then
Yeah.
again,
And it's so
when
complex.
exactly. But when you go there and you say to this person, you need to be sent to a facility, they've sold off all the facilities. The facilities don't exist anymore. Somebody made a lot of money out of selling those properties in the middle of Sydney. Where are they? Where do you send these people? That's another thing. There has to be places to send these people. I was telling
The
you the other
change to
day.
community mental health is not everyone is suitable for community mental health.
That's right. And the family know. The family know when something's happening to their loved one. They know, there should be. That's where this register should exist, where this person is a known schizophrenic and is known to do this, known to do that, and known to act up, or he's a known ice addict, or he's a known this person, he's known that person. There was a talk the other day about how police and ambulance should share information. We, at the early stages of what we're trying to do, one of the other recommendations we were trying to get it brought into place was an alert system, right? So at the very point of the phone call to 000, the very point of that phone call, whereas in my case or in Stephen's case, there was some talk that his mother rang the hotline and said, this person has stolen the car and he's off his medication, right? Now, at that point, there should be a program in place where the answer to the question should determine where the information goes, right? So if my son's stolen the car, that's nothing to do with ambulance, right? That's police. My son's stolen the car and he's off his medication. That becomes a community problem where we've got some lunatic in a car roaming the streets looking to kick off, which is exactly what happened to my son, right? Now, I've also got back from high-level police and high-level ambulance people saying, that wouldn't have made a difference. But let me tell you, if that information was put out over the phone, and that's another thing, these older men say that it would only be radio noise and you can't put it onto a phone. Well, the phones work better than their radios sometimes, most of the time, right? And I can tell you right now, if my boy had got an alert saying there's a lunatic in a blue Mazda, when that blue Mazda pulled up next to my son at McDonald's, my son would not have just said g'day to the guy when he got out of the car, right? My son would have said, there he is, clock up, boom, gone, ring the police, they've caught him. Effectively what it does, it would double the eyes on the street. So if the word out is blue Mazda, blah, 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 number plate, and you happen to be sitting next to him at the traffic lights, you don't have to even make him aware that you even know who he is. Just tell the police, here he is, he's at the intersection of this, this and this. And if that had been the case, things may have been different. And that's just hypothetical, but that's what we were asked about. And there was problems about privacy, and there's problems about this, and they come up with all the reasons why they couldn't. I'm a bit over reasons why they can't. You know, I'm sick of being told why we can't. I'm more interested in how we can. And
the way I think about it with privacy is that as registered, as sworn police officers, as registered health professionals, we're bound by our registration, and they're bound by their oath that you can't be misusing them. And if you do, then you face the consequences of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the shits with concerns that belittle the professionalism of the people involved. And if those things are abused by those people, then they face the consequences of that. I mean, there's obviously police officers that look up abuse. There's documented cases where they've given in domestic violence, they've given the addresses to people that they shouldn't have, and they've lost their jobs and they've been charged, and so they should. So there's consequences to actions, but you've got to. How many things could be changed positively rather than negatively from things like that?
Well, why just dismiss it as, oh, it's too hard?
Yeah.
Why? My question would be, well, what are you going to do about it? Like I said to you before, stop showing up. If they're not, don't turn up to things. And then what would society be then? No police, no ambulance, no fireys, no nurses. That's what we're looking at. I mean, I know that's completely ridiculous, but that's the potential. Right?
Yeah. So where are we now with Stephen's Law? What's next, or where are we sitting?
Well, to be honest, I haven't got a clue. But
so do you really? I'm guessing that you need a politician to take the lead and draft the bill.
Well, I'm told that what we're trying to achieve is sitting on the Attorney General's desk. So having the conversation before, God knows where that'll end up. But I've also been told that he's only one vote. So,
yep.
I may need to take it away from the health minister or put it in the industrial relations minister's court and say, well, as an OH&S issue, as occupational health and safety, this needs to be addressed as well, because we're all workers, aren't we? It's all what we do for a living.
Yeah.
Realistically, I've only been doing what I've only launched this since December last year. So in 6 months,
yeah,
I've managed to achieve a fair bit of awareness for what I'm trying to do. I can't see it stopping now. The whole two-person responding being called Stephen's Law is a beautiful gesture, but it can't be that can't be it. I can't just go, okay, I'll give up now.
Yeah. My job's done. Everything's fixed.
Yeah. I'm not Homer Simpson. I can just disappear back into the bushes and be me again. That can't happen now. I've got to continue to do what I'm trying to do and get what I'm trying to do. But having said that, I know that wheels of government move slowly. But at this point in time, no one's saying no. No one's saying you can't do that. No. I need legal advice as well. And the sale of the stickers is helping us do that too. Like the stickers giving me an opportunity.
How do people get stickers, Jeff?
Oh, how they get stickers? You just send me an email on stevenslaw12@gmail.com. They're $5 each, and a minimum I'll post is $5. If you're a paramedic, make sure you tell me in the email and I'll send them to you for free. If you're a person who wants to support, then they're $5 each. I don't believe you should be paying for them to stick them on ambulances. So if you're in a station that's got 5 vehicles, tell me you've got 5, and then there's another 5 if you want them for yourself, then you pay for 5 and I'll send you 10. So that's the idea there. The idea is to get the awareness into as many electorates as possible, as I've said already. But it's also for those members of the public who want to be part of this and show their support and raise the numbers and get this to the Parliament so that it can happen. And that at the end of the day, when it does happen, we can all go, yes, we did this together. We were part of this. Your $5 is not $5 in so much as money spent. It's joining a movement, takes these things to the people who can actually make the changes for us. And while I'm getting access to the Premier and the Health Minister and the Attorney General and the Minister for Mental Health, that's where it's at. I'm taking the cause for you guys to those people, and they are the people that can make the change. So get on board, buy a sticker, and I do ask if you do, put a sticker on your car and take a photo of it and send it to me, and I put it on my Facebook page. Like I say, we've got 10.1 thousand people watching it, and I'll do reels of all your stickers. So you can sit there and go, oh, there's my car, there's my car. Yeah, look, we're in. That's great. And it makes us all feel like we're part of it. That's the part that that I'm trying to put out there, that we're doing this for yourselves and doing this for the community. So that's what that's all about. So if you want a sticker, give me a call. Also, I'm thinking about launching a range of hoodies and these T-shirts and tote bags and things like that. And the money's raised will go towards the campaign, so we can go and visit and stay, do those trips around New South Wales and then be in Sydney for a stay overnight for these conferences and all those sorts of things. That's what the money from the stickers does. So, yeah.
What's your Facebook page, Jeff?
My Facebook page is Stephen's Law.
That's with a V, guys. So yeah, Stephen with a V.
Stephen's Law. There's other pages that are law firms, so they look up Stephen's Law. And it says something about protecting our frontline heroes as well.
Yeah.
So get on that.
So, guys, my call to action to everyone, and I don't care what state you live in, is write to your local members, your state members, and write to the caucus, write to your health minister, write to your premiers. You have to be the voice that, as Jeff said before, each member of parliament is one vote. So you have to convince the entire government of the day and the opposition to vote for this law when or if it's brought in. And this is in every state. They've all got their own governments, and we're all state-based employees. So we need our individual states to approve very similar laws to this. And I think, if New South Wales are first to go, if one takes it, I don't think it'll be long before it spreads around to other governments and other jurisdictions, which is fantastic. But you need to write. You need to email your parliamentarian, parliament people. You need to write to them. You need to A, bring awareness, but B, you need to bring accountability to them. If you write to them, they have to write back. They will write back. They will acknowledge your email. And if you need to, if you're passionate about it, sit down with them. Make an appointment with your local member and sit down with them and explain to them, especially if you're a paramedic. The one thing Jeff said, he's gone around and almost everybody has a story of being assaulted at work if you're a paramedic. But I guarantee you 90%, 98% of our parliament people do not know that.
That's right.
They don't know your story. They don't know your assault. They don't know the effect that it's had on you. And the only way we can spread this is by telling people. Don't keep it to yourself. Talk to other people about it. Talk to the general public about it. Make some noise, because it's only when people are beating the drum that shit can change.
That's right. If you've got any ideas also, I'm not pig-headed about what I'm trying to do. If you've got any issues that you want me to take to Parliament for you or that sort of thing with regards to what we're trying to do, more than happy. Send me an email. Say, I saw you the other day and I'm happy for this, but my problem is this. I was even thinking about I've got a website up that I'm a bit of a technosaur, but I've got a website up, and I was thinking about putting a notice board or a forum on that, so you could tell your story to other people, and we would come together as everybody raising the awareness, And I don't know if that would be something you'd be interested in, you guys, but if that was a place for you to vent, or a place for you to tell your story, or a place for you to get what out and give it, so we can acknowledge yourself and what you've gone through and all that sort of stuff. if that works for you, then tell me, let me know, and I'll do my best to set that sort of thing up. But if you can follow myself and my family on Facebook, I know it's just another platform and a lot of you don't deal with it, but if you could just get on there and say, look, thank you for what you're doing, or you're doing it wrong or whatever, I'm happy to cop any sort of criticism from you all. But understand that we're doing this for you. This is for yourselves. It's not for me, and it's irrelevant to Stephen now, but it's for you guys that are copping this shit every day. And it's for you guys so that we can make a difference and start with New South Wales, or start with the Queensland as well. You guys have got a government up there that's pretty staunch on youth crime and that sort of thing. Maybe it'll happen in Queensland before it happens in New South Wales. I'm happy for that. I don't care. Where it happens, it happens. But also, when you're talking to your politicians, mention Stephen's Law. Mention Stephen's Law, and then it can all be consolidated into the one program, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So this
is
awareness.
A movement that should be affecting the entire country. Yeah, and like you said, and beyond. It's a movement that we should all be behind. Stephen's Law, when you say that word, should bring up two things. It should bring up an image of Stephen, and then the knowledge that we can change things to reduce the likelihood of this happening again. It's not going to prevent every assault. We don't, we all know we work in an uncontrolled environment. Okay. We know that bad things can happen to good people. That's, why most of us have a job. But we can take steps to prevent it, and we need our politicians, and they're the ones that create the laws. And don't just do state, guys. We need federal involvement as well. My dream is that there is there is a federal Department of Emergency Services, or a federal Department of First Responders. Not about the emergency response. It's about the people. The same as there's one for Veterans Affairs, there needs to be one for first responders, because there's hundreds and thousands of us, and the vast majority have been assaulted. Every single one of us that does this job is affected, whether you know it or not. You're affected by our work.
100%.
It's the best job in the world. I don't regret doing it for a second, but it hurts you. And if it doesn't hurt you when you're young, it will have an effect when you're older. So we need to make noise. We need to speak up for ourselves, because if we don't speak up for ourselves, nobody's going to speak up for us. And we don't want another tragic death like Stephen's before people start getting loud again.
If you're affected by it, like most people were, then put your hand up and do something about it. If you're touched by the ripples, and obviously you are, if you're touched by what happened, and obviously you are, then do something about it. Let's work together to do something. And when we do get it, and it is in, and it does change lives, then we can all say, we did it. We've done it together. Also, the reason I tell you all of this is because some people may think may worry about my mental health. And the reason I do these interviews and that is to let people know that I choose not to be hurt by this anymore. I choose not to be damaged by what happened. I can't be hurt. Nothing can happen now that can make what happened to us any worse. And by speaking to people like yourself and to the people that are listening, I get great solace from that. When this interview's over, you can say to yourself, he's all right, that bloke. He's dealing with it pretty good. He's going all right with it. He's taking it to new levels, right? That's what I'd like you to think of me, about me, and that's what I'd like you to think about my family. We're damaged. We're not broken, right? We're damaged. We're not broken, but we're in the position to make a difference. And me knowing that you know that gives me great solace. That makes me feel like what I'm doing is worthwhile, and that I can't be hurt by it, and I choose not to be. So if you're worried about my mental health, don't worry about it. we got it together.
Jeff, was the baby, it was Stephen's baby, a boy or a girl?
It was a little girl.
Little girl.
Lily Mae Stevie is her name.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask for her name. So Lily Mae Stevie, can you imagine how proud she's going to be growing up knowing that the laws have been changed because people spoke up and got them changed under her dad's name. Under her dad's name.
Yeah. You know, already you say to her, "Where's Dad?" You know what she does? She goes like this. She's 2 years old. She says, "He's in here." So,
yeah.
You want to make me cry? Keep that up, mate.
No, but it's something we can all do, guys. Every single person who's listening to this, everyone who watches any reel that I make for this, anyone who goes to that Stephen's Law Facebook page, you can make a difference by simply writing an email, making a phone call. But writing an email takes 10 seconds, 20 seconds, a minute if you're going to make it, really thought about. And put a comment on the page, because by creating noise, you create more ripples, and everybody needs to be touched by those ripples that Jeff was talking about. So, is there anything you want to say about Stephen before we wrap up?
Look, the whole thing from start to finish has made me extremely humble and extremely grateful for everything everybody's done for us. People like yourselves and your people in the community deserve better. And if I can bring that about, then my job's done. And I'm so humbled and so grateful to have you people in the community. And I'm so proud to be doing what I'm doing. And I know that my son would be proud of what has happened since his passing. It was very, very sad. It was very, very wrong on so many levels, but it was so touching to have it happen and to be made aware of how much you people appreciate what we're doing is very, very humbling. And I'm so very proud to be doing it on your behalf.
Mate, you'll always be a member of the paramedic family.
Cool.
So, all right. So Stephen's Law on Facebook page. You can stephenslaw12@gmail.com. Is that correct for the email address?
Yeah.
Yep. So if you want some stickers, you can support Jeff's cause. This is a cause that it doesn't get closer. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for taking your son's name and just elevating it. Yeah, I'm really proud that you've come on. I'm really proud to share your message, and I hope people share this message far and wide.
At the end of the day, mate, if we can get this happening, Stephen will be immortal. In 100 years, someone will say, "Stephen's Law, what's that all about?" And they'll look it up, and then they'll know. And they'll know that my boy's name was not just another incident that can be flicked as like news scrolling, oh, what happened to that paramedic? Oh, yeah, nothing. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a legacy. And if it creates better work conditions and a safer community, then so be it. Thanks so much for inviting me, mate. I appreciate it so much.
No worries at all, mate. If you've got any feedback, make sure you contact me. So contact at beyondthecall.au. You can email me. You can tag me on Facebook, or if you can share, the best thing you can do to get this message out is share the podcast link. You can get it on all the major podcast platforms. It's on YouTube as well. So have a listen and share it. It takes 2 clicks and you've spread the word. So Jeff, all the best, mate. Like I said, you're always going to be a member of our paramedic family, Australia wide, and I imagine if there's international people, then our heart breaks for you, but we're also so bloody proud of what you've done and where you're going, and we support you 100%. So thank you, and thanks everybody. Bye-bye. We'll see you at the next one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Call. If you like what we're about, please make sure you subscribe, and if you can leave a review, that would be appreciated. If you have feedback or suggestions for future guests, please contact me via my socials. Please share with your networks and help me expand my reach. It's a great privilege for people to share their stories and allow us to go beyond the call.